ladies. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial business owner, the founder of Shalo Glow LLC, an all-natural skincare company that helps you glow from head to toe. I am a champion for your daily self-care, business care, and intentional wellness.
Hi, y'all. I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, Amazon bestselling author and publicist, and dancing social worker who helps you upgrade yourself in community care.
Together, we are a podcast rooted in the 8 dimensions of wellness and the co-founders of Women Connected in Wisdom community.
And we like to get together every week and invite special expert guests for intentional conversations about how to be wise in business, relationships, and wellness. How do we do it all?
So much to do, right? Today we were talking about occupational wellness, and when we talk about so much to do, it reminds me of us working before the podcast, and you think it's 3 steps, and then there's all these other steps. It's always, something more to be done, a detail to look at, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
I am too. Yeah. Even the pre podcast conversation, I have to say I feel called out a little. So, so I have to tell our listeners, and I'll put it in our show notes. And I'm not an affiliate. I should be, because I've told so many people about this product this week. But when we talk about occupational wellness, like, I'm getting my systems in order, especially around calendaring. I don't know if anybody else has this issue, but, I used to be a very faithful, tote it with me calendar person, right? And then I travel so much, I had to go electronic, or what I thought I had to do was go fully electronic. But I'm realizing, especially with my ADD, like, the fully electronic does not completely do it for me. Because as you know, I'm triple booked this week, right? And I realized, like, how did I get triple booked on some major events, right?
Yes.
And what I realized is because when I went into my electronic calendar, well, nothing was going on the start of that big, I was wide open. But then when you pull back and you do the bigger view, like we talk about in Stillpoint, right? Yes. We talk about the broader perspective. I did not listen to my own writing. Always gets you in trouble, doesn't it? So I was realizing I wasn't seeing the big picture. So I have this new product that I am just loving. And it is this wall calendar that I found on Etsy. It was one of those Instagram ads. The algorithm completely caught me, but it's beautiful. It is I'm going to show you real quick. Okay. Don't look at the mess of my organization on. But look at that. So for our listeners that are not seeing, they're just listening, it is every month has its own calendar. It has its own color. So it's this beautiful rainbow calendar, and it's reusable. So there's a couple of different ways you can reuse it, but I'm using clear sticky notes. And who knew that was a thing? Can you just, for somebody who loves office supplies, it was like, what? There's clear sticky notes. So I just have to share that my life and systems are improving thanks to an Etsy store called Kaleidoscope. They're based out of North Carolina, women-owned business. And I'm just loving it. And, usually calendaring is a little torturous for me, but I'm just so happy to go to my little calendar.
And, this is what I wrote about in volume 2, right? Writing it down in the physical planner and then putting it digitally. And, for the past 3 years, we've been doing the podcast. I'm like, okay, Christine, I'm going to work on doing my digital calendar. And it's always been something I need to get better at. And I did it this week. And guess what? Wasn't written down. Almost anything for my week in my physical planner. You know what I mean? And we have the conference coming up on Friday, Saturday. Right? Like, these things definitely have to be organized, but that's why I love us.
Listeners, before we get into the show, we hope you're planning on joining us this Friday and Saturday, February 23rd and 24th. It's the second Women Connected in Wisdom Summit, and we'll put the link in the show notes, but you can get your tickets for free over at Humanitix. The other thing you could join us for is tomorrow night, Shannon and I are speaking at the Dances on Behalf of Peace event that Interplay is doing, the 12-day event, and where we are dancing for peace and talking about it. So we've got some full big stuff coming on.
Yeah, we do. And how you balance that with the occupational wellness, with your
Right?
self-care, with what I like when I started working in this planner this year, I read the instructions that the supplier gives. And she said,
Okay,
follow one
wait, pause. Right,
Mhm.
pause. Okay, you read the instructions on your calendar?
On the planner
Okay,
because,
on the planner.
because I plan on having a planner, so I'm like, okay,
Right? Yeah,
let
yeah,
me
no,
see
I
what
love
they did.
this. I
Yes.
love this.
And I still need to get better at reading instructions, but that's another
Yeah, I'm not an
podcast.
instruction
Right.
reader. I'm a
No.
leaper. If something goes wrong, then I back up and maybe
Right.
read them. But
Mhm, mhm.
oftentimes I just Google and what
Yeah.
I do wrong. But
Right.
okay, I love this
Right.
about you. I love
So
this detail orient.
and I've been working on it, right? And what she said was fall in love with the white space and
Mm,
leaving space in your schedule. So I'm working on the digital, I'm working on the
mm.
space and um that's what helps me do all of this stuff that we do when I think about this definition of occupational wellness.
Fall in love with the white space.
Yeah.
Okay, I am really gonna have to play with that because that is not where I play most often.
Mhm.
So I am really, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
so that's what I've been working through. Volume 2 for me is challenged me to hold my systems. That's what I talk about. And we'll get
Right?
into the conversation with our guests,
Right?
right? Maximizing your capacity. And it's not about doing more. It's about being
Right?
effective, minimizing burnout, making sure that you're organized. And what I've learned through the books and us working with all these amazing ladies and experts is you have to do the pre-work, right? If you get there, you're just showing up for the task, you might not be ready, right? So make
Right?
sure you do your work beforehand. That means writing stuff down. That means communicating with your team, setting up realistic expectations. The task itself, let's say the project of publishing a book, usually we do a good job at making space for that. But then what about the follow-up? Right? Are
Right.
there any outlying questions, any outlying details you need to follow up with? Did you thank your team, right? How can you set yourself up for next time? But then you also have to rest, and that's the white
Right?
space,
And
right?
doing it with ease and joy and laughter and chocolate. Like, I think all that is really important.
I gotta take the chocolate off though, because and I was telling Farrell this week, I'm breaking out and the
Oh,
chocolate
so,
is
well,
now
it's
it's
not your
now on the list of
friend.
things that I love
Okay.
that does not love me back. And we
Oh,
have
I'm
to know
so
what's on our
sorry. Or a cup of good tea or a good walk. I
Mhm.
took a beautiful walk today. I had a walking meeting this morning because the weather was so gorgeous and walking over by the Chattahoochee and doing creative collaboration, but while you're walking the dog, one of my favorite ways to work. Well, should I go ahead and give our listeners the definition we're playing with so we can call our guests up here and
Let's do
jump
it.
into this combo? All right, y'all. So today's definition is about occupational wellness. Occupational wellness represents living in the purpose, passion, and productivity in one's chosen profession. This includes work life, and we always put it in quotes, balance, as a fulfilling and productive professional life is fitting to weave together with a healthy personal life. Whew. What stands out for you about that?
Mm. The purpose, passion, and productivity.
Mhm,
Because for me, I've been thinking about what I wanna speak to the high schoolers about next month, right?
mhm,
And the productivity reminds me of what do you need right now? Right?
mhm,
What's most effective to do? The passion is, making sure that your heart is in it so you can be enthusiastic. And when those two things come together, for me, I've had the beautiful opportunity the past few years of doing this with you, doing Shaylo Glow, helping
mhm,
people in different facets. And that's what's made my occupational wellness, I think, increase since COVID because I've been
mhm.
intentional about these three things.
Mm,
Yeah. What
mm.
about you?
Yeah, I think about, well, I mean, this morning I was doing this meeting and, there's a lot of reasons that I could talk about being stressed right now, just how many balls I have that I'm juggling in the air. But I really just took a moment and I took a deep breath and I was so grateful, right? I was so grateful that I work with people that are like, "Hey, you wanna walk for our meeting today?" Why,
Right.
yes, I do.
Yeah.
Like, that is perfect. Let's not do it over Zoom. Let's meet at the park, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think about that. I think when we were saying all the P's, I love alliteration. So when
Me
you were
too.
saying purpose, passion, and productivity, I was thinking peace because, we got this peace thing going on right now and we're speaking at
Yes.
it tomorrow. So I was thinking how to have peace in that, right? And how to have peace when we're also out of balance, right? Because I'm out of balance this week. I've got more on my plate that needed to be on my plate.
I
It's just
understand.
temporary, right? It's going to come back. But even how to be in peace in those moments of when we're making change or when, you know, we're talking to our guest today about transformation and social change makers. And there's times you and I were having this conversation earlier today because we're prepping for tomorrow about there's times when it's important to in order to create peace you're not in peace like you're having the difficult conversations or you're having the and so I'm thinking about all that swirling in my head with occupational wellness today.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Mhm.
That makes sense. And you saying that reminds me, before I read our guest bio, it reminds me of a conversation I had with somebody at work and a trainer, asking how to coach somebody. And what it brought up is the fact that if you don't have this conversation of this change that you see that
Mhm.
needs to be made, um, because let's go back, he was hesitant about making this person uncomfortable, right? And some would say that that's disrupting the peace. But if you don't make them uncomfortable to encourage somebody getting better, now you're part of the reason why we're not hitting the standard, right? Um the execution is not where it should be. But also now you have in yourself this feeling. Now you have chaos that you're holding on to because you didn't set the expectation with another person. And what we find in coaching and development, a lot of times this person might appreciate it. So you're anticipating them having anxiety or feeling some type of way about it,
Mhm.
but that might
Mhm.
not be what actually happens.
Well, and especially if we talk about things like that with kindness and care. Even when we're talking about things that may not make people comfortable, we can approach it from a peaceful place and kindness and care.
Exactly.
And I love that. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so are you ready for us to jump into this conversation with our expert guest?
More than ready.
Yes, yes, let's do it. Okay, guys, so let me introduce who we're talking to this week. Shilpa Jain is currently rooting herself in Oakland/Berkeley, California. For 11 plus years, she served as the executive director of Yes, working with social change makers at the meeting point of internal, interpersonal, and systematic change, and
Mhm.
aiming to co create thriving, just, and balanced ways of life for all. Prior to taking on this role, Shilpa spent 2 years in the education and outreach, as the education and outreach coordinator of Other Worlds, and 10 years as a learning activist with Shikshantar, the People's Institute of Rethinking Education and Development, based in Udaipur, India. I think I said that right. Yes. Where she served as coordinator of the Swatgami Walkout/Walk-Ons network. She has facilitated dozens of transformative leadership gatherings with hundreds of young leaders from over 50 countries. She is passionate about dance and music,
Mm.
organic and natural farming, upcycling, and zero waste living, asking appreciative questions, and being in community. A focus on healing, forgiveness, compassion, love, and wholeness permeates all of her work and life. Help us welcome to the stage Shilpa Jain.
Hi,
Shilpa!
Shilpa. Thank you all. Thank you. So
Abs-
good to see you and meet you again.
yes,
Mm.
yes. Happy you're here.
I love that you started the show with the dancing. I was dancing backstage with y'all.
Thank you. Yes, yes, you were included. I saw you busting a move.
And my little seat here. Yes.
Yeah.
We are embodied podcasters, that's for sure.
Wonderful.
Yes. So when you hear our definition of occupational wellness and think about the topic that we're diving into today, transformative leadership and social change makers, what comes up for you?
I was thinking about this and listening to you both talk about your calendaring and talk about so much to do. And, I was thinking to myself, one of the things that's been really beautiful and also challenging in my own life is updating my own sense of what is success. What does that look like? What does productivity look like?
Right.
Because I think the models that I was given were ones that were overworked, overdoing, exhausted, and feeling like this constant sense of urgency and scarcity, which I think, undermines our wellness in deep ways, both personally as well as in our relationships. Because if I'm carrying like my work is the most important thing about me, which is one cultural, and I think it's easy in the US to forget that's just a story that the US tells itself. Like there are many cultures that don't operate that way, that, oh, like what I do, what I'm producing is what's the
Right.
most important thing about me. But I don't think we've had enough conversations in the US to really like update our sense of what does success mean and what does well-being mean. And I've seen that both in our kind of traditional sort of business world, but also in the world of social change makers, where it's just transferred the same ethos. The problems are so big, the urgency is so big, whether it's racial justice or climate change or immigrant justice or LGBTQ or any of these things, which are all beautiful, important things. And yet how we care for ourselves and how we care for each other has not been updated to reflect the world we want to see. So we're in that battle of what we need to do, what we're supposed to do, how we should be, and taking some time to maybe slow down and look at like, well, what does it look like if I'm practicing the world I want to see every day? What does that
Yes.
look like actually? And how does that shift then how I am with myself, how I am with others around me, and how I am with my work?
I
Because
love
it will fundamentally shift.
So how has your definition shifted since you've been sitting with that?
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about for a long part of my life, which I grew up in Chicago. I was uh, kind of steeped in social justice, environmental issues, feminism at a young age, got very activated, and was looking into that. And I kept coming back to this truth that my friendships and the relationships that I had were what really lifted me up. And
Yes.
even in all the work that I do, that was always the foundation. I got to like develop these meaningful, intimate friendships with people who are also passionate about and cared about the same similar things. And at the end of the day, celebrating the person and the people before the agenda and prioritizing the person and the people before the agenda became so clear to me. So as I've been sort of like sitting with these questions and looking, I'm like, all right, what does it look like collectively when we start to do that work? I feel like I've been doing that personally. I've tried to embody that in some of my work and invite more people into that conversation, that it's not just about getting the things off our checklist, whether those things are, social justice oriented or successful businesses or, being good media spokesperson, whatever our thing is. It's less about that, but it's like, how am I? Who am I? And how am I with our we in this whole moment? And so that's what's been, the practice of that and inviting more people into that practice and exploration has been a big part, I think, of
Yeah.
this last like decade and a half of my life.
You haven't even been on stage 5 minutes, and I feel like I need to re-listen to this episode already.
Yeah, I want to ask a question, Shilpa, because when you talk about that it's transferred over to social justice organizations, and sometimes in my experience, it's even more so. Because I've worked in nonprofits almost my whole career.
Wow.
And the expectations of that are often unrealistic and unsustainable, because so many times when folks work for nonprofits, we are passionate about the mission. We are like devoted, but then it's so easy to get out of balance and it's not sustainable. So I kind of want to ask a practical question. I could say asking for a friend, but y'all know I'm probably talking about me.
Right.
Like, how do you make that shift?
Yeah.
Like, how do you start to make that shift
Yeah.
towards
Thanks for that.
sustainability?
Thanks for that, Christine. Yeah, I think you're hitting the nose on the head where it's like, yes, because we care extra, because we love this issue, we care about these people, we care about this planet, we care about whatever it is, we go above and beyond our capacity. It's easy for that to happen. I've done that myself. I was an ED, as Shannon mentioned in my bio, for 11 years. I was 10 years a learning activist in India with this people's movement on rethinking education and development. It's so easy to go to the place of self-sacrifice, and not the sacrifice that, of course, there's some beauty in sacrifice. I don't want to diminish sacrifice entirely, but there's a place where that cup starts to drain and drain and drain. And I'm still pulling from the dregs of my cup to keep feeding the work. And how to make the shift to me is about first pausing to recognize. The first thing that always is so crucial is to pause. Whoa, where am I? Am I doing that internal check-in? Am I taking the time for that internal check-in and noticing? I started noticing, in years of doing, like, I'm getting more migraines. I'm not sleeping as well. I'm putting on weight. I'm not feeling as well in my body. I'm getting just like my back's, I'm in my mid late 30s and my
Yeah.
back's going out, things that
Yeah.
I'm like, my 80-year-old grandmother would lift up, 2 huge pots of water every day up 3 flights of stairs. She
Wow.
did that till she was in her 70s, and I'm in my mid 30s and my back's going out. Like, what's going on in how I'm approaching my life and my work? So when the pause comes, then the body starts to speak even louder, because it's like, oh, you're willing to notice me now. Here I am. And then I think a lot of it, again, there's like the personal and internal work, and the self-care is important. But the bigger and deeper part for me, and in addition to that, the deeper part for me is the collective conversation and the collective noticing. And I think with social change work, along with, many other fields, there's a sense of like, it's all on me. It's all on us. It's all on our org. It's all on our movement. If we don't do it, it's going to fall apart. The world's going to fall apart. The movement's going to fall apart. And I don't think it comes from just like some self-aggrandizing ego. I think it comes from this sense, again, this like isolation, this narrowness that's built and steeped, particularly again into North American culture, of this sense of like, we got to go it alone. And even if it's my movement, we got to go it alone. If we don't do this movement, then nobody's going to take care of it. And so this willingness to look out and to feel the web is another big part of making the shift, that there is a web going on in the world. There's a web of relationships we can tap into. The earth is a web that we can also join forces with, that there is so much more out there, and how to shift from that isolation and then all the pressure and weight, which then necessarily will lead to collapse, into the sense of like, oh, there's a lightness I can approach this work with. Even serious work, it doesn't have to be held in a way that weighs down my body and spirit, because I'm looking at it in the web. I have a part of it. I have my part to contribute, for sure. And it's not the whole. And that is the shifting, the mental shifting, that then helps the whole rebalancing of the system, So those are a couple.
I so resonate with that. And, I'm a certified interplay leader, and practice like our body wisdom and listening to our bodies, and that approaching it with grace and joy. And thank you for that answer. Shannon, you look like you had a question.
Well, not a question. I just wanted to add, because like Shilpa said, it's the pause. And that reminds me of Stillpoint, right? Going back to just that moment to notice, right? It reminds me of volume 1, when I talk about Shalo Glow and just every day checking in with your body, right? I have the physical wellness, thankfully, that if my toes, if I hurt my toe, I feel it, right? But somebody who has diabetes, somebody who has lost feeling, they might not know that. So they need that pause just to see. And in volume 2, when I talk about the SWOT analysis, we do a pretty good job at this, right, Christina? Okay, let's pause at the end of a project and see what happened. It's the level setting of what can go next, right? And the boundary of, this is what I have to give today. This is what I have to give this week. And past that, if more is needed, it's either going to have to wait. It's going to have to be somebody else. And just making a plan for what that looks like, instead of trying to do the task right here and now, make a plan and push it out because the rest of this time is for something else.
Mm. Hey, Shannon, you talking about SWOT. I don't even think I've mentioned this to you, and Shilpa may already know this, but somebody was introducing me to a new model it's not new, it was just new to me, the SOAR model.
Okay.
Which is strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. So I was like, ooh, even that little shift from SOAR to SWOT and that language shift and that I was like, interesting, right?
So it's the trait of the weakness to the aspirations.
And the opportunity, instead of saying weakness, aspirations, which I love that shift.
I like it. And we try to be positive. Shilpa, you were talking about operating from scarcity, right? The goal is definitely to operate from abundance. My pushback would be something that I've been working on based on this book I'm reading, right? And it's a book about sales. And she's talking about always remembering to consider your competition. Me, I'm somebody who's introspective. Again, what is my part? What can I do? How do I need to get better? What do we need to do next? But it is important as a person to know what your competition is, to know what your weaknesses are. So for me, when I hear aspirations, that's a goal for the future, but we still have to be intentional on, but maybe it could be the opportunities in the project. And that's what it's talking about, but I think it's important to say, hey, we could have been stronger here. What do you think? Do you think that it still covers the conversation as effectively?
I don't know. We have to explore it. We have to look it out. It's really brand new introduced to me.
Yeah,
and it made me think about it when you said that. I was like, okay, right? Like, and that's the thing I think, Shilpa, some of the things you're talking about brings up for me is, and we know, right? Like a lot of times when it's the water you swim in, you don't recognize that you've taken a big gulp, right? Because you're out here swimming in it. And
all the nuances.
Right.
And collectively, the water level keeps rising. And so, it used to be, okay, you work an 8-hour day, 5 days a week. And now it's like, nope, got to work that 10-hour day. Nope, we're all working now on the weekends. Nope, we're all working on what holidays? What? What? Why is it that 40% of Americans have never taken a vacation? Like we have a weird water level in this in this country. So I think that's even part of it too, is to recognize what is the water we're swimming in, and is that reflective of the world we're trying to create?
I love it when you say it that way. Yes.
Yeah. And that's where I'm connecting your point about opportunities, aspirations, and also it could be weaknesses and threats. We could look at it either way, but what we're trying to get to is what do we want our lives to look like? What do we want? Not just personally, collectively. What do we want? We want to have I want to be able to walk in my neighborhood and feel relaxed. I want to see beauty around me. Okay. So how am I living a little bit of that every day? Am I living that? Or am I tied to my computer where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to leave from here and day to night. I'm in one spot. And I think there's that again, there's some kind of just it's like a mismatch because we don't slow down, because the speed and the urgency is there. Then that gets missed again and again. And so I keep coming back to just personal pauses and collective pauses. Opportunity to do, whether you do SOAR or you do SWOT, just come down and slow down. What is happening to us as a result of what we're doing? Personally, interpersonally, and systemically. What is happening? And how can we be honest with ourselves about that, and gentle with ourselves, and compassionate and accountable to ourselves about that? There's a both and in all of that. And so that to me is what is in service of the occupational wellness. And I think that is what transformative leadership is about, is the willingness to take those moments, to pause, to reflect, to operationalize or make that a collective, natural practice. So we get the feedback to feed forward,
Yes.
It's all around us. And I work a lot also. I don't know if this came out in my bio, but I do work a lot on conflict transformation with people. And I'd say, maybe without exaggeration, probably over 90% of conflicts happen because of speed.
Ooh, say more about that.
Sure. Something happens. Let's say,
Hey, y'all, this is a great place to take a break, take a deep breath, and hear from our awesome sponsors that make Women Connected in Wisdom podcast possible. Shannon, we are so grateful that Shayla Glow is the sponsor of the Women Connected in Wisdom podcast. And I wanted to take this moment to ask you, when you think about the people who use Shayla Glow, who are we talking about?
That's a good question. I think about 3 groups really. One, the group that's removing hair, right? So whether you're using laser hair removal, waxing, shaving, you got to make sure that you're putting back what you're taking out. The second group, I think about those with dry skin and the problems that that might cause, right? The scars, itching, burning, whatever the situation is, you definitely need all 3 steps, right? The exfoliation, making sure you're taking the dead skin cells off, the oil, putting in the moisture, and then the shea butter with the aloe, sealing it, helping you heal. Those things help both groups, right? And third, for the third group is those with chronic illness. You know, the story is personally from cancer and different diseases that our population is dealing with on a daily basis throughout families as individuals. So I'm thinking about my mom and my grandmother and those around me with the same generational ties, right? And what positive, healthy habits we can start to make sure that we're maintaining our wellness, especially because the skin is like the cape, the exterior, the shield for your immune system. So with COVID, we have to be intentional about covering ourselves. And those are the groups I think about.
I love it. And you know what else I love about your product? It's all natural, handmade, and it smells great, y'all. So
yes,
yay.
Tested. Yes, esthetician tested and approved. Yes. What about you? When you think about your company, what groups of people do you think about?
Well, you know, I work with individual coaching clients, I work in community classes, and with corporate teams. And with all of them, I use a strength-based, embodied approach to help folks connect with themselves and access joy, reduce burnout, and build resilience. You know, especially during these times, I think we need it. I think we need all the hashtag partnership power we can get.
Yes.
Ooh, say more about that.
Sure. Something happens. Let's say, Christine, you and I are working together. Something happens between us, a misunderstanding, but I'm going fast. So I make a story up about it. You make up a story too. Then I go over to Shannon. Oh, Christine did this. And Shannon is also going fast. And her story and my story connect. And boom, now we have a campaign. And now we've gone bigger. We get bigger. And it goes, it's so quick. The mind is so quick to generate an airtight story with ample evidence in a moment. And I need that. If I don't pause, I don't actually get a chance to say, well, what happened for you there, Christine? Let me share what happened for me. There was this impact. What was your intention? Oh, you meant that. Okay, I see that. I get it. We slow down. We work it out. We clear the space. Fine. But in the speed, in the rush, there's no time for it. So the story gets created instead of the actual interaction and relationship. And throw technology in the mix, and it's a hot mess because then it's just even quicker, right? Like even less time. And I am interpreting emojis and texts and emails. It's not even a conversation or an interaction. It's like I'm interpreting things that are already 2 or 3 degrees removed from a like human holistic interaction. So,
or the lack of them.
right.
So
Exactly.
I find it interesting right now, right? I find it interesting that folks nowadays want instant responses. Like and this is in all levels of different organizations I've worked in, but people are so used to being connected to their devices that when you don't respond immediately, they make up a story about that. I got an email at 9:30 Saturday night. And I did respond, and I responded with care, but it was a short response because it was 9:30 at night. And it was so interesting. It's like, and checking myself on that, like, oh, that wasn't a good boundary. But also noticing that, why did I feel compelled to do that at that time? And it's like, it's that, whoo, right?
And for me, what comes up there, Christine, is, and you know how I am, right? people can have their expectations of immediate response, but this is what it is, though. Like the
Right.
level setting of, and this is what I have the capacity for, right? This
Right.
is how it will actually move forward. And hoping that if somebody does have a story, that they will bring it to me, and we can address it. We can be open. And I'm thinking about my wisdom in action. I know we're not there yet, but I love how you said the leave space for the pause. Just leave space for it, leaving space to have that conversation. And that was one of my favorite lessons from being an RA when I was at Kennesaw State is the conflict mediation between the residents and the roommates, right? And realizing how, just like the example I gave earlier, how nervous people were about confrontation. Oh, I don't like confrontation. Well, who said it had to be confrontational? Why does it have to be a confrontation when we're communicating? Even if it's something that you might think somebody else might not like, I can calmly, from a place of love and peace and understanding, leave space for it and let's put it on the table and talk about it.
Right.
And we were talking about it at the Glow Club this past weekend. I'm going to start calling it the processing table, right? It's like a surgery table. Let's put it on the table. Let's process it and take it apart so that we can really deal with situations, deal with things that happen and continue to move forward. I want to be light. I'm not carrying all this stuff my whole life, but we're not sweeping it under the rug. I'm not holding on to it and getting sick. We're going to put it on the processing table and work through it.
I love that. Thank you for that, Shannon. Yeah. And it connects to what you said about falling in love with the blank space, the white space in your calendar, like actually I can't have that kind of spaciousness if I'm carrying all this stuff around. And you use the term also expectations, right? A lot of time I'm holding expectations. This person in front of me or these people in front of me, they don't know my experiences. They don't know my history. They don't know my needs. I sometimes barely know my needs.
Right,
How much is
yes.
the person going to know and get it right? But again, in that rush and that urgency to be productive, to get it done, to finish whatever it is, we miss the opportunity. And I've seen so many relationships just fall apart. I also see a lot of people suffering in their workplace so much because of those relationships, because they don't put things on the processing table out of a story of what the other person can do or can't do. Again, because our minds are so quick to create this story that then they're suffering. And talk about a place of occupational unwellness, right? It's like relationships don't work. It makes every day difficult. It's not about the task in front of me. It's about the 100 other things that are occupying my brain, particularly how am I going to see this person? What are they going to say to me? How are they going to do that? And I'm not putting stuff on the table and processing it. And so it doesn't move. That weight is, I think, is as common in a social change-making space as it is in the other space. And sometimes, again, like you were saying earlier, Christine, even harder, because now I'm like, oh no, it's about the mission. I shouldn't even care about this. I'm not going to discuss it. But then it gets heavier and worse because conflict doesn't grow linearly. It grows exponentially. So every missed thing adds up to another 10, 20 degrees of intensity in my body and my spirit.
Wow.
Oh, that's a powerful statement. So conflict grows exponentially. So one of the things we haven't talked a lot about, Shilpa, but I think I want to speak it into this space because I know I've experienced it a lot in nonprofits and social change making organizations, is a lot of the folks that are coming to this work have either experienced trauma themselves or could be secondary trauma, or they're currently in, like, because of the way the systems have been created, right? And so I think when we add that to the mix also, then what I kind of want to know, because I always like to give it to me, right? What's your best tool, or what is your, what resource do you give to folks when there is a big issue to be processed, or when there's exponential conflict with, let's just say social change makers, because I belong to a couple of those organizations. Where do you start?
Oh, first start with the breath. Start with the breath. Yeah. This is a lot of what I support people in, is building the container. Because first we have to build a container that actually is different than that scarcity, urgency, competition, where like there's only going to be one winner and everyone else is going to lose, like moving out of that container, the dominant container, into one that is intentional, co-created, conscious, right? Moving, sometimes they call it moving from the unconscious container that many of us have been steeped in to a more conscious container. And that's a collective practice. So, it's arriving, it's having a clear invitation to people, like, let's face this thing, let's bring it to the table, and letting people consent to do that. I can't spring that on them. It doesn't work, right? Then people go in their defensive mode. But if they're invited, hey, there's some stuff we need to talk through. Let's bring it to the table. Let's do it in a conscious way. We set the invitation, people arrive, we ground together, we bring in our truth of terms of like how we're arriving, how we're feeling, we connect the dots, we tell the story, we weave where we're coming from, framing where we're going today. We set our agreements of how we want to work together. We set our intentions, moving from expectation to intention. That's all the groundwork. And then the tool that I often share is like one of the core tools is a tool around comfort zone, stretch zone, and panic zone, which I'm happy to, maybe we can put in the show notes, the graphic that I'll use around that. But the central idea that we each have a comfort zone, which we're comfortable, where we know that is unique to each one of us. And collectively, we may also have a collective comfort zone that's also familiar to us. Then there's the stretch zone where I'm uncomfortable and I'm able to listen. I'm able to be present. I'm able to speak from my heart, speak from the I, rather than in generalizations or, collective terms that maybe people agree or don't agree. But I'm here, I'm in myself. And then there's my panic zone where I'm not present, right? I'm not able to. And then collectively, we might be in our panic zone where we've been in a reactive space. That becomes normalized. That becomes our comfort zone because we're so used to it. So we have to slow things down, and then letting people sort of name, like, this is what's been going on for me. This is where I'm at, and practicing stretch in our listening as much as in our sharing. So I'm speaking, but I'm also willing to stretch my listening to receive information new that might shake up or disturb the stories I've created. And that's okay. And I can slow that down and slow that down. So I'm naming a bunch of tools, but it's a lot about the container, a lot about slowing down, and a lot about bringing this awareness, inner awareness in, and sharing that collectively with our listening as well.
I love it. Shilpa, in the piece that you shared this week, one, I love your vulnerability. And we talk about social wellness, friendships. So if you haven't read it, y'all, sign up for Shilpa's newsletter. And this was really good. I want to talk about this layered trust that you mentioned, right? You said layered trust has been vital to weathering the storms in your leadership experience. And can we talk about that in the context of building this container, right? Transformative leadership and taking the pause that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the layered trust I'm talking about is that trusting myself. Do I trust myself? Am I building my own sense of self-trust? Which again, Shannon, as you were saying, like that self-care, that pausing, that's how I know I can trust myself, like, am I actually doing that for me? That interpersonal trust, right? Am I willing to trust you? Am I willing to say, if I give you this invitation and you say yes, I believe your yes is sincere. Trust in that, right? And you're doing the same for me, and I'm trusting that because I can't read your mind, I'm trusting that you will say what you want to say, and I will also be able to listen and so forth and so on. And when we can't, we slow down. We slow down rather than going into the reactivity. We slow down. And that's a systemic trust too. It's like we're building a container that we are collectively agreeing to. This is what we need if we're going to do it. And we can go slow in building that container. It doesn't have to be fast. We have to go, but we go at the pace. Adrienne Marie Brown, in her book, one of the things that she always talks about is moving at the speed of trust. And to me, that trust is those layers. Am I moving at the speed of the trust where I'm trusting myself in this process? Am I moving at the speed of trust where I'm trusting you? Am I moving at the speed of trust where we're building a trust container that is going to serve us to work through this conflict, to lead this project, to restore this friendship, whatever it might be that we're facing together? But those are the layers. Yeah.
I love it. Is there a pace that you suggest when you talk about the pause and the space? What type of framework would you give to somebody who's working on resetting their pace since we've been going so fast?
Well, I like the advice I once got from one of my mentors, which was start anywhere, follow it everywhere.
Okay.
So if what you can start at is 30 seconds, great. Start there. Maybe then you find that 30 seconds becomes a minute of pause. Maybe you can find a little bit more and following the thread of what happens to you. You know, Christine was talking earlier about like listening to the wisdom of your body. What happens to you as you find that pause? Collectively, if we're a group of people working on something together, collectively, what can we start with? Can we start with taking a minute of silence at our meetings? Can we start with naming a little bit more of our truths beyond just like, how was your weekend? But now like, what's that? How are you actually feeling in this work? Can we take a little stretch into that vulnerability? And then what happens? And follow that thread. So I think, you know, that will be different, of course, for each person based on where they're at. But I think we each know that there is a place that we can stretch that isn't maybe where we are stretching. And I like the framework of under promise and over deliver on that. So don't start like, I'm going to take an hour.
Right.
I find a minute, take your minute. Take your minute. The minute's still going to be worth something because every little bit expands our stretch zone. And celebrate that minute, you know, celebrate yourself, honoring. Taking this minute to tune into my own trust of myself.
Yes.
And so on. Let it build from there.
Can you say how your mentor said it concisely again?
Yeah. Start anywhere, follow it everywhere.
I love that.
That's from one of
I love that.
Yeah.
And what came up for me is a timer, right? So planning things, writing it down. Absolutely. But sometimes it's even if it's a minute, if it's 5 minutes, if it's a 10-minute nap, you know, when I set the timer, I can set it and forget it. And now I can let go of the responsibility of worrying about time. You know what I mean? Sometimes maybe with meditation or certain things you don't want, or maybe at the end of meditation, you know, of course, judge for yourself what works for you. But a lot of times for me, that makes it so much easier to take that time. I know that I can do whatever I can get done in that period and then keep going at whatever pace I need to after that.
Yeah. Some people, they do the more routine thing, right? Like I wake up, I write my morning pages. For me, it was, I know I want to start the tea kettle. So I'd start the tea kettle in the morning and give that time before it whistled. To engage in a practice. For me, that part of that practice was a reflective writing, right? I wanted to do that. So how do I do that and build it into my routine and my day? So it becomes as natural to me as like pausing to have my meals, you could tie it to a practice. You could tie it to a timer. You could tie it to your routine. But somewhere where it starts to just become part of you. And then you notice more and more becomes visible. And and since we started the conversation you all did around calendaring, I'll just say that's a part of it too. Is like, I start to notice now more and more like, oh, this week feels full. I already have this much going on. No more. My next availability is this time. I'm really looking at that, taking that time for that blank space to show up for that. Am I breathing in my day? Am I not breathing? Like this is all part of it. But those are, again, the individual level. And then collectively, how do we do that together too? Because it's hard to go it alone. You can't be on it on my own.
Right. And I have one more question before we go into the wisdom and action. You said something earlier about us attaching who we are to what we do, right? And that other cultures don't do that. What do you see as being in the middle of other cultures who you see get this right?
I don't know. I get it right. I mean, I think everywhere has their own suffering. They have their own situations, but you know, I because my family's from India and Udaipur. I lived there for 10 years. And one of the first things that I noticed so deeply was like, when people would meet each other, the thing they were always trying to figure out is how are we related? How are we connected? Either by blood or because we know the same places or because something, find the common ground. And my experience of living in the US is we're trying to figure out what each other does a little bit more of like, where do I rank you? That's sort of the
Right.
impression that I was getting. Where are you ranked? Not
Yes.
how are we related?
Mm.
So, and then I go to some other cultures like Mediterranean cultures, and it's like, how do we enjoy? How do we find pleasure? What's our pleasure here? And work is something. It's important to, keep the household, but that's not the focus of life. The focus of life is this joy, this pleasure of like earth and food and community and relationships. It's another thing. So there's so many ways. And so I don't want to say one is better or worse than the other. I just think sometimes when we go off track, where it becomes only about or largely about what do you do and did you do, and then we have these competitions. Oh, I know I didn't sleep at all last week, and oh, really, I didn't either, and I was so I haven't taken a vacation. It's like we're like one upping each other on our
exhaustion levels.
our exhaustion, because it's successful.
Right.
I think that's the thing that when I was pointing to is like, maybe collectively, even if we can't do it in the whole, I have hopes that we can still bring some of this around in collective, our bigger, North American culture, but at least in our small cultures or small C cultures, can we start to change the conversation? Can we start to open at least the possibility that there might be many other ways we want to talk about success and talk about a joyful life and talk about meaning, and purpose, as you're saying. What else is our purpose connected to?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I love that, Shilpa. I love the how are we related, but I also love the like, what is bringing you joy? Like, oh. All right, so let's ask each other that this week before we go on to the next. So what is bringing you joy this week, Shilpa?
Well, this week I'm very blessed to have these dear friends and their 1.5-year-old baby visiting.
Yes.
That's great joy. I'm also hosting a South Asian women's brunch, which is kind of revived since COVID. It's been off for a few years, but I've made a new friend recently, and part of our friendship is leadership. The thing that we're doing together is opening this brunch again. So I'm very excited for that. And yeah, for me, I think so much of my joy comes from relationship and community. And so any little moments or experiences of that I get during the week and I have is really my deep joy. Yeah.
Ooh, I love that.
How
What
about
about you, Shannon?
Yeah.
Oh, I am really so excited about this conference, giving our ladies more space to talk about their chapters and their stories. Shilpa, you keep saying slow down, and it's reminding me of Dr. Amanda Kemp. She's talking about running and being a runner and how she needed to slow down. We talk a lot about a lot of different things in this book, and I think they're really timely. So to give the ladies more space to talk about their resource, talk about why it's been effective for them and how they stumbled upon it through their stressors and situations and opportunities that they have turned into something beautiful for themselves and other people. I love that we do this. I love that we do that. So 2 days with the ladies, like I'm getting ready for the party, so that's my big moment of joy. One of the big moments of joy for me this week. What about you, Christine?
Well, I mentioned it already, but getting to go walking and walk near the Chattahoochee, which is I love that river, and connection. I mean, I am full up on connection this week. But we have over 350 people registered for this dance on behalf of peace, and
Yes.
so I'm getting to see people I adore and meet new people, and then we have the Connected and Women's Summit, Women Connected
Yes.
in Wisdom Summit. Let me be able to
Yes.
speak today. So I'm delighting in connection and dancing on behalf of peace. I think both of those things just bring me a lot of joy, and looking towards that versus the tech.
Right. Versus the work side of it. Yes, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you.
Very.
Okay.
Beautiful.
So what about, and this is what I was going to say, that we jump to the wisdom in action. So Shilpa, as our guest, I'll let you go first again. What are you doing intentionally this week for your occupational wellness?
Well, really tried to space things very much, a lot of that calendar spacing so I could leave a lot of time for with these friends who are coming. And also just one of the things I started doing is I'm like, I am only taking on this many projects. I am not taking on more. So I did a great practice this week where 2 more opportunities came and I passed them on to other people. Again, believing in the abundance that there is more than enough out there. The web is there. I do not need to carry it all. So I did that this week. I feel really good about it. So honoring my boundaries and limits and embracing the empty space, really knowing that this is enough for this time, like really honoring the enough. That's
I
enough.
love it. Honoring boundaries, honoring the enough, and leaving space.
Leaving space.
Right. What about you, Shannon? What are your wisdoms in action this week?
And I said earlier I was talking about leaving space, but my calendar looks like your calendar. Like there is less white space. You know what I mean?
We gotta reverse that for both of us, right?
That's the beauty of time is you get another reset every time.
Yes,
Right.
Yes. So let me see. My wisdom in action is what I will actually say is leading connection. I've thoroughly enjoyed being a young leader, and being able to help these women use their voice, to be able to develop management teams and sales teams and kitchen staffs and venues, and like to have that opportunity and be 30, it still flabbergasts me. So I'll say leading connections.
I love that.
Thank
I
you.
think this week I'm gonna go with pause. Like often I say calm in the midst of chaos, but like pausing in the midst of these big events. I remember the first time I did a triathlon. I was swimming around the buoy and the sun was shining and I was the only person out there that paused. And I just took a moment and I looked up, I was like, oh wow, like you're really doing this. And I feel that often in my life, like big things, big events. And I do remind myself to pause. And I appreciate that reminder, Shilpa, that it's
Yes.
like in the midst of these we're doing some big things this week that we can pause and soak up the joy of community and what we've created. So I think that's mine.
I love it.
Yeah.
So important to do that.
Celebrating the small wins and those big
Mhm.
wins,
Yeah.
just for the celebration.
Yes. Well, Shilpa, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Mhm.
Can you let our listeners know where to find you? I told them about your newsletter. Can you tell them about how to get connected?
Sure. Yeah. So my newsletter, my Substack is there. Feel free. There's lots of juicy articles around leadership and healing and community and conflict. So feel free to check that out. I am still doing some facilitation for the organization I used to direct called Yes. And so yesworld.org is great. There's a lot of upcoming jams, which are this co-creative learning experience of that conscious container building and all of the healing and magic and vision that can come through when we practice that way. So please check that out, yesworld.org. And and you can find me on the internet. Please come and say hello and get connected in any way you would like. I'd love to stay connected.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for your wisdom and all that you offer this world. And just delighted to be connected with you.
Yes.
Me too. Thank you all. I'm wishing you a wonderful summit this weekend. It sounds like it's going to be absolutely wonderful. So
Thank you so much.
congratulations in advance.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I just could keep talking to Shilpa for like hours.
I keep thinking about the conscious container building. It's important to restructure it, and say, what do you want to happen? What does that look like?
Right.
What are you doing every day to live that?
Right. I really appreciated that. And I appreciated the reminders, right? Because I do a lot of those practices in my life, but sometimes I don't acknowledge them, right? And
What
the
do you mean?
reminder, well, I mean, I have a story running in my head this week about how busy I am, but
Okay.
not many people get to take a walk a meeting and go walk on the Chattahoochee. Like it's a yes and for me, right? Because I build in some of that for wellness and practice and just I think it's when we think about mindset often, like which part am I looking at? Like,
Yes. I hear what you're saying.
what am I looking at and what am I letting into my body? So I really appreciated that reminder. I love Shilpa's energy. Like I don't know about you, but like I'm calmer. I'm like, I feel like it was a pause of a conversation, right? It's like, oh, I'm just more relaxed. So
Yeah.
I love that. I love that we have a conversation about occupational wellness.
Mhm.
We're doing our work
Yeah, we are.
and we're feeling more relaxed.
And I mean, that's how we know that Women Connected in Wisdom is part of our purpose. You know, we know it's a passion, it's part of our purpose. We know we're productive, right? We know that episode 148. But it's important. It's so important, you know. And I think about heart math with Lori Ives. I took that class and she was talking about the cortisol levels, the stress, you know, us having to continue to go fast, all these things that Shilpa was talking about. You know, this conversation, I hope it gives our listeners hope on how to do it, you know, hope that they can be successful and still restructure. And we talked about the drain, and I think it was before the show, how sometimes you can give and give and give and your cup is draining. You know, I hope it's a reminder to not even let the cup drain, you know, give from the saucer and make sure that your cup stays full and that you keep pouring into yourself, and the rest can be for the people that you collaborate with and who are in your community.
I love
Yes.
it. As
Yes.
always, my friend, it was a delightful conversation.
Yes.
And more shall be revealed as we go
Yes.
along.
Yes. And we're gonna jump, y'all. It's been an hour, so we try to, you know, keep it consistent for our boundaries, for your boundaries. So don't forget, we know we've talked about it a couple times. We have the conference coming up. If you like these resources, you want to dive deeper into conversations like this, you know, you want to spend some time with some of our Amazon bestselling authors for volume 2, go to Humantix. We have the link in our link tree. We have the link on our social media posts. Get either a free ticket, you can come for free, or if you want the replays and the VIP basket with some Shalo Glow, some other goodies, some connections to our authors, go ahead and sign up for that ticket, and we'll see you on Friday and Saturday. In the meantime, don't forget,
Be well,
be wise,
and be whole.
We'll see you next week. Talk to you soon. Peace.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Women Connected in Wisdom podcast. On air live on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern via Facebook and YouTube. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be part of the conversation and get connected at womenconnectedinwisdom.com.